Before this video starts, if you enjoyed this video, there are many more like it already on the channel with many more like it to come in the future, so subscribe. I am trying to hit 125,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so I'd really appreciate it. I upload daily on this channel, so if you're looking for some consistent basketball talk, this is the place for it. Also drop a like on this video, it only takes 1 second, it makes a massive difference. The Golden State Warriors had a reign of terror over the NBA for the better part of a decade. They revolutionized basketball, and then on top of that, they added one of the best players in the league to their team, making them pretty much an unbeatable juggernaut. Except that didn't entirely work out due to Kevin Durant getting injured in the finals and then leaving for the Brooklyn Nets. On top of that, Klay Thompson tore his ACL in the finals, which meant he'd likely be out for the year. The Warriors this season did not have the highest expectations, but they did have some expectations. However, these were thrown out of the window once Steph broke his hand and played all but 5 games of the regular season, resulting in one of the worst records in the league that eventually materialized into the second overall pick in this year's draft. So the Warriors now sit in one of the more unique positions in the NBA. They have their championship core still together. Granted, there are some question marks about how good Klay will be, if Steph can repeat something resembling the magic of his 2016 season, and if Draymond Green will ever be as good as he was like 2 to 3 years ago. But still, that core is together and it is a championship core. However, with Kevin Durant far gone and the depth they had previous to Kevin Durant far gone, along with the Western Conference being a lot better and deeper than it was when they were running the league, them winning another championship is far from guaranteed. So in today's video, I want to lay out my plan for what I would do if I was in the position of the Warriors GM to get them another championship, how I would use their assets to build the best possible team and have them win yet another. So let's get into it.
Absolutely incredibly with the acrobatic alley-oop.
There are a few things the Warriors have to address in this offseason. The biggest one is probably how do they improve this team's depth. Because once you look past the 3 OG Warriors dynasty players, this roster starts to look pretty suspect. To the point where not only do the Warriors need to just get more depth, they need to get some really good depth. They don't have any high value role players right now. The next thing to address is what do they do with the number 2 overall pick? Do they trade it for a player, or do they draft someone, and if so, who? And another thing, and this is kind of part of the last two, but how does this Warriors team build up an elite defense that they had in the years previous? Because with Draymond Green declining, Klay Thompson coming back from injury, the overall defense of this Warriors team is up in the air. And then finally, there is the question of what to do with Andrew Wiggins. So let's address this first problem, which is depth. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to solve this problem by signing a bunch of players in free agency. The cap situation in Golden State is less than ideal. They have a lot of money tied up into 4 players. They basically have no cap room, so free agency-wise, they can only bring in minimum players. However, the Warriors do have a $17 million trade exception, which means they could theoretically trade nothing for someone making $17 million and still be fine. I mean, they'd have to pay a dickload in luxury tax, but that's nothing new for the Warriors. This exception expires after the first week of free agency, but I imagine they're going to make sure to capitalize on that. They could do a sign and trade for a guy like Danilo Gallinari, or even more reaching for it, you could get Jeremy Grant, or you could just do a regular trade. Maybe if the Rockets decide they're blowing it up, you could trade for Robert Covington. That would be huge. But as for some realistic options, rather than swinging for just one guy, I would rather personally trade for 2 to 3 pretty damn good role players rather than just one really good one. Here's a trade I came up with the Kings, where the Dubs get back Nemanja Bjelica, who is a fantastic stretch 4, and I'm sure I just butchered his name, as well as Richaun Holmes, who is a really solid starting center. This graphic took way longer than it should have to make, so I'm still talking so you can appreciate it. Look at it. And now drop a like, bitch. I also made a mistake and made these graphics, which I now can't use because the trade I hypothesized are impossible, so I'm not making more after this. I just don't have it in me. Another avenue I could see if this team was okay parting ways with him would be that trade exception, as well as probably that Minnesota Timberwolves pick in exchange for Jonas Valanciunas. Though I think you could pull that one off with just 2 Warriors first. Maybe you have to do that Minnesota pick. I would just personally favor 2 guys over 1, so I'm not a huge fan fan of that. Another option is Patty Mills and Derek White from the San Antonio Spurs. This one would likely cost the Minnesota pick because White has a lot of upside, but he can also contribute right now. By the way, just in case people freak out, I don't think that Minnesota Timberwolves pick is going to have nearly as much value as a lot of people think it will, because I think the Timberwolves are going to be pretty good next year, but that's just a side tangent. But in this hypothetical, I'm going to go with the first trade proposed with this very nice graphic that, yeah, you're looking at it again, deal with it. Next, let's talk about Andrew Wiggins. Do you trade him, or do you hold on to him in hopes that he turns his career around in Golden State? Let's talk about the latter. Wiggins throughout his career has struggled for a variety of reasons, but the two biggest I'd say are either a lack of effort or lack of understanding of how to improve, as well as a lack of stability in Minnesota. But in the case of Golden State, I can't imagine a much better place for Wiggins to get both of those things and turn his career around. This team is obviously very well experienced, and they also have a good track record with developing talent. However, Wiggins is 25, almost 26, so I'm not going to be expecting a huge leap from him, especially with a long track record of not seeming to give a shit. I don't expect him to be a significantly different player, but I do expect him to be a pretty decent contributor for Golden State if they hold on to him. People have been saying that Wiggins is going to be like a way better Harrison Barnes for Golden State, and I just completely disagree with that. I don't think people realize just how well Barnes fit into Golden State's system. Like, yes, he's not an amazing player, but he was a part of the original Death lineup for a reason. That seamless fit does not exist with Wiggins, but if he can shoot more threes, cut down on almost all of his mid-range attempts, and play defense for the first time in his career, then he will be a good role player. But what about trading him? Well, Andrew's larger salary paired with a number 2 pick could net you something pretty damn nice, and to me there is no clearer trade than moving those 2 assets in exchange for Jrue Holiday. This way the Warriors starting lineup can be Steph, Jrue, Klay at the 3, Draymond, and Richaun Holmes. That would help the defensive issue a good bit. Jrue, Klay, and Draymond is a really good defensive core, and Richaun Holmes is pretty nice on that end as well. That's a good defensive team and a good offensive team. Jrue is another ball handler and shot creator, which can semi-make up for the absence of Kevin Durant. Obviously, it's nowhere close, but it's not a total absence anymore. Not to mention, I think Holiday's playmaking ability would add an interesting dynamic to this team because Curry, Draymond, and now Jrue are all great playmakers, so the ball will be whipping around the court. So I won't talk about who they're going to draft at number 2 because I personally think they should trade that pick in exchange for Jrue Holiday, and I think that's a pretty fair and realistic trade. However, that doesn't mean I think they should outright avoid this draft in general. I'd suggest trading one of their future first-round picks for like the 20th pick in this year's draft and use that to draft Desmond Bane. He's someone I believe could be a 25+ minute a game bench contributor from day one as a rookie. Very good shooter with a solid all-around game. I think a future first around like the 22 spot in this year's draft gets you Desmond Bane. As for some smaller moves that I pretty much always recommend, I'll just shout out some of the cheaper guys in free agency. Those guys being Brandon Knight. He looked really great in 8 games with Detroit. Jeff Green was amazing for the Rockets in the playoffs, and DeMarre Carroll is a solid, cheap 3-and-D guy. So basically, in summary, I would trade Andrew Wiggins and their draft assets in exchange for Jrue Holiday and some depth. So going into the 2020-21 season, in an ideal world, the Warriors have a starting lineup of Steph Curry, Jrue Holiday, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and Richaun Holmes, with a bench unit of, let's say, Nemanja Bjelica, Desmond Bane, Kevon Looney, Eric Pascal, and Brandon Knight. With that starting lineup, there is the perfect balance of offense and defense that the Warriors, teams that won championships in the past, had. And off of the bench, while it's not amazing, I think both Bjelica and Bane, as well as Kevon Looney, could be pretty solid contributors. And on top of that, they're keeping the Minnesota pick as well as Eric Pascal, which could be used for further assets and players. So that is what I believe the Warriors should do to try and secure a title in the 2021 season. By no means do I believe this made the Warriors a clear-cut favorite. However, this definitely puts them up there with the Lakers and teams on that tier. If you want to support this content outside of just your like and subscription, I have a Patreon where you can go give me money for some extra content, and also go check out the editor of this video, Rudy St. Clair. His channel is going to be linked in the description. But that is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.